Good afternoon, everyone. I present a preliminary result of our project on climate envelope models. This one is climate envelope models for reef flat gleaning fisheries. With me this project is a meteorologist and climatologist, Robert Madrina. Next slide. Okay, reef flat fisheries supply about 70%, could supply up to 70% of protein requirement of coastal communities. So it's important for food security. And it's at risk for overfishing. And just like what Professor Bob they told us earlier, the intertidal is really the most threatened of all marine ecosystems. But the fisheries are usually undocumented in government statistics. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so these are just pictures of this kind of fishery, and they're usually not documented in the government statistics. Next slide, please. And so what we did was to survey several areas in the Philippines. Next slide. And there's only one study that documented the fishery in all its aspects, and it is by Professor Del Norte campus in our campus in the Visayas. Reef gleaners usually work 6 hours a day, and usually in groups of 3 or 4. And in some areas, there's a traditional tenure for the reef flat. They partition it according to their custom. Usually it's about 4 hectares each. So these are pictures of a family, a woman and her children collecting mollusks of the reef flat. So for the economics of it, approximately about 15,000 Philippine pesos, or approximately about $385 are earned by a gleaner per year. And the statistic is based on the price that is landed in barangay or village markets in the Philippines. And reef gleaning is low capital and highly accessible, so there's a lot of people and families that are into it. And the 15,000 or $385 is essentially the national poverty income threshold, which is approximately $388 according to the latest statistics from the government. So if they're just collecting, they're just making enough money to just a little, not even to get out of extreme poverty. So before, they rely on their husbands who are fishing, so reef gleaning becomes additional income. But with overfishing happening, so it's becoming more of their main source of income. So the threats are, really overfishing from the artisanal and commercial fishing, also from natural stresses like typhoons and monsoon events, man-made acute stresses like pollution and oil spills, and of course the possible effects of anthropogenic climate change. So we looked at several important species like some cocktails like and clam, Gafrarium, Anadara, and Tridacna, the giant clam, and some gastropods, Nostrombus, and Rhinoclavis, which is sand creeper. So we use a climate envelope modeling approach, and this kind of approach was first used for terrestrial ecology. So it correlates species distribution and environmental variables to define the species tolerance, and what is generated is what is called a tolerance envelope, which is spatially represented. And this approach has proven quite practical and useful in assessing the effects of changing climates at large geographical scales, but not much at finer geographical scales. So what we did is, just to get the initial distribution of these species of importance, I got the database from the US, from the Delaware Museum of Natural History, which has the biggest collection of Philippine mollusks in the world. So based on their georeference data, we plotted the ranges and overlaid this with a freeware GIS called Viva. And we overlay remotely sensed and local oceanographic data, temperatures, and also nutrients and salinity. Now from our field data, we overlay our small-scale temperature data and other data from bioclim. And we use the maximum entropy models in the Maxent software. So just to show you, the hottest provinces in the Philippines are the ones facing the western coastline. They have what we call type 1 climate. And we sampled, just to get the local ecological information from the northern part of Luzon to the Visayas. And so this is the kind of environment that we are sampling, and you click it. And so in this reef flats, we deployed a temperature sensor, which is deployed in the lower part of the intertidal. So this temperature sensor is able to log temperatures for 1 year at every hour. So at regular intervals, we take it out and dump the data in a computer. Okay, so it can measure temperatures for every hour, and it's not really expensive. We bought it from a laboratory supplier in the US. It costs only about $99 each, so it's not really that expensive compared to others. So this is how we also did ecological surveys. Okay, and to measure even the other parameters, so per 1 meter quadrats in the various habitats, we're taking data. And we use the Maxent model, but I don't have any time to explain what Maxent is all about. Perhaps you can download this reference from the internet. Anyway, based on what we have, where in the country do we find the highest mollusk diversity? So based on the 35,000 records, much of the mollusks to be found in the Visayas, and also in this part, the Verde Island Passage, which is the highest center of diversity, and according to Ken Carpenter. Also for the gastropods, you see the same pattern. However, based on the models that we came out, there are some models that are not tolerant to warming. So for example, for Gaffrarium, which is a very heavily exploited cockle, this is the modern probability that you'll find it if there's no change in temperature. So if you don't add any temperature, so you'll find it in these areas. And essentially it jives with the fishery data because much of the fishery for the aquarium would be collected from this area. However, if you put 0.5 degrees to the model, then the places where you can find it at higher probability becomes smaller. And if you put 1.5 degrees Celsius more, then the probability of collecting it becomes even less. So for the other species like, for Tridacna, there's a lot of information on Tridacna, especially on their tolerance to temperature because it has been a focus for mariculture. So based on our records, on the distribution of records, if it's normal, then you find it all over the country. However, if you add 0.5 degrees, the places where you find it at higher probability begins to shrink. And so if you add more, if the temperature gets higher, then the probability of finding it in large area becomes even smaller. And for the next species, Strombus, which is a gastropod, you'll find it in the country in these places at highest probability, but if you add another half degree, then the probability of finding it becomes less, and if you add another degree, the probability of finding it will be very, very small. Now for the last species here, rhinoclavis, we have the same story. So next slide. And the probabilities begin to get lower. However, there is a species, next slide, which seems to be adapted to high temperatures, but we still have to take a closer look and probably add more data. And this is Anadara, so it's not that common, but it's still an object of a fishery. So when it gets warmer, next slide, the probability of finding it becomes higher. The next slide. Then, when it really gets warm, then supposedly the model predicts that you'd find it even better. Next slide. However, when we did some experiments in the lab, we noted that it can tolerate temperatures up to 35 degrees Celsius without showing any stress. About 35 degrees, they begin to show some stress. So perhaps they may be tolerant to higher temperatures, and the only research I could find that was published was somebody who did a similar study on an Australian species in Queensland, which shows that this cockle is tolerant to higher temperatures. So anyway, in conclusions, the climate envelope models may tell us which species are at most risk for increasing sea surface temperatures, but we need to have more intensive surveys to really make the model more accurate. And there are many factors that may cause a decline in the fishery, and this has to be examined together with the climate envelope model. The climate envelope model can just tell us a bit of information, but it cannot tell us the whole story. So this project was supported by GIZ, okay, the German Agency for International Development, and by my university, and also with all the different towns in which we surveyed the fishery. Okay, I would just like to acknowledge them. And the different agencies of the government also help us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any question?
Yes, Professor Day.
Did you try any of your plans with carbon dioxide in the water at all?
No, we did not. But we included the CO2 levels from the NOAA data. But we did really put CO2 in our lab experiments. So we really, to make things much simpler for analysis, we just use temperature as a problem.
Sure. And did you get the clams to do some work? Did you get them to burrow in the sediment, or were they just sitting there?
We use a bare aquarium because we wanted to see their stress response.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you would suggest, probably.
Yeah, I think if you put them on the top of the mud and you get them to try to dig their way into the mud, you find the temperature at which they can dig is much less than the temperature that they can survive.
Yeah, on the surface. Thank you.
Any question? Okay, we close the Benjamin.